All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Matt Pfeiffer. This is Conversations on Retail. Super excited to be back after a long holiday break. And as I was mentioning off camera before we started, actually moved into a new office right across J Street in Bentonville from all of the construction taking place at Walmart's new global headquarters. And so for a long time, I officed at the corner of 8th Street and Walton Boulevard, right across the street from Walmart headquarters. And the only thing more fun than that has been kind of watching this construction take place out my window. So beautiful day in Northwest Arkansas. We're here today with Sharon Belto, and Sharon and I have known of each other and had some interaction over the course of, probably the last 10 or 15 years, but never had really an opportunity to get to know one another closely. And she's got a super fascinating background that we want to dig into. Really have worked and led some incredibly successful consumer product teams, a lot of that from Northwest Arkansas. And now you've got your own company and you're working with supplier teams to help them, get on the shelf and manage and optimize their business with Walmart and with so many other retailers. So Sharon, it's a real pleasure to spend time with you. Thank you so much for making time to visit today. So I do want to spend the lion's share of this time talking about what it is you're doing at Tiger Retail, but I think it's important for context to kind of start at the very beginning of your career. And I'd love to know, I think I've made a mistake in the past and maybe going too deep into the backstory, childhood and favorite color and best friend and all that sort of thing. But I am curious how you ended up at LSU and what your vision was for your career when you started your university experience. And then E&J Gallo was your first job kind of in the consumer product space. So just kind of talk about how you ended up at LSU, what your mindset was then, and how you ended up in that very first job after you graduated.
Sure. So I'm from Louisiana. My undergrad was marketing at LSU. And so I obviously ended up there because it was about an hour and a half south and, grew up watching the Tigers. So needless to say, like a lot of people here, go to U of A. It's in your blood, so to speak. So went to LSU, absolutely loved it, and still I'm a diehard fan today, as you know. So that being said, when and it was different in the 80s. I hate to date myself, but it is what it is. Back in the 80s, we weren't as sophisticated as a lot of young people are today. We didn't map out the plan. We didn't spend years taking SAT, a prep. We just showed up, and it was probably after a wild night of drinking or something, right? So times were really different. So when I went, it was kind of like, my dad said, look, I don't care if you get a degree in ping pong, you're going to get a degree. So because, again, back in the 80s versus today, it wasn't necessarily expected. So both my parents went to LSU. So I was very excited. And really when I got in there, it's kind of like I went into business, not knowing, again, no strategy behind it, no big planning like they do today. I simply just jumped in there. And I thought, my dad always said, follow your passion, do what you love. And if you do that and you work hard, you'll be successful because you enjoy what you're doing. So he said, so don't try to force it. And I try to tell a lot of people that today that I mentor, it's like, don't try to force yourself in a role to say, oh, gee, I want to go make a lot of money, so I'm going to go in this role, I'll go do this. The money and the happiness and the success is going to come 100% from within, right? And there's a lot of things that go within that as far as who you work around and what you do. So really, I really let my passionate heart just kind of jump in there and kind of back then just kind of go with it, if you will. So got a degree in marketing, got it in 4 years. That was the other thing. My dad said, I'll pay for college and sorority, but you got 4 years. You get 4 years and you're on your own. Unlike today, our kids are sometimes professional students. So again, got through school, graduated in the 80s, and then I love sales. And I think I say I love sales that, I did some things with, like I was candy striper, I did some volunteer work. But what I found a lot of the fun thing I like doing was when I was doing some volunteer work that involved helping some local businesses in Baton Rouge, kind of on the selling side and watching selling people. And, I like to talk. And so I just, again, not a sophisticated strategy at all. I just kind of find something I wanted to do. And I was very fortunate in that I had a headhunter call me and say, hey, Gallo Wines is looking, it was in New Orleans, said Gallo Wines looking for someone right out of college. And they used this distributor as one of their training grounds. They had one in New Orleans and a distributor in California. And so I was like, wow, I like wine and okay. So when I went to work for Gallo, I was the first female rep back then, which was probably not a surprise from the 80s. And let me tell you something. To this day, I laugh because when I think about here's a sales rep, I was running what their first new, what they called on-premise. This is back before we had Chardonnays, or we had white wine and red wine, and it was Gallo. And so they didn't sell anything. They, all their product was sold in the stores. And I just laugh. And again, I won't go into so much details on my jobs, but the first one was so fun because I got up every morning. I had 2 bottles of chilled wine in a little bag and little tasting cups. And I literally went around in uptown New Orleans to all the uptown restaurants, Dickie Brennan's, everybody. And of course, when you're Gallo, they don't really want you on their wine list, but they love to cook with your product. So I spent all my time as a single 22-year-old in the kitchen with young chefs, eating and drinking my way through New Orleans. So it was a blast. I think I was making like $17,000. So, but I laugh because I said, I'll tell my grandkids this one day. It was the most fun job I ever had because I love the people I work with. And I think that's where I knew at that point, I love sales. Because I loved the high of when I would make that sale. I'll never forget when I first got on the house wine over from Inglenook, taken away from one of the largest restaurants. And I remember calling my boss and he picked me up. We went out and celebrated. It was just the joy of getting the sale and, watching the excitement. I lived for that. It was so fun. And I think my passion came through. So that's why I was successful. So I continued to work with Gallo, was there for about 10 years. I call myself the beverage chick because from there I went on to work for Coca-Cola. So I went from alcoholic beverages, non-alcoholic beverages, and had as much fun, if not more. Coke was just an amazing company to work for. I loved the people I worked around. And again, the whole time it was about doing what I love. I didn't, right or wrong or different, where a lot of my friends would constantly be looking at postings online, new jobs coming up with Coke. I just was loving what I was doing. And I started out by selling I was like a regional salesperson for cold drink. Then I ended up getting promoted into a different sales role, going national. And then honestly, that's what led me to Bentonville, Arkansas, which was such a blessing. So
that's what I was going to ask you is how you ended up. Was Coca-Cola what brought you to Northwest Arkansas? And indeed it was. And
it was Coke. And of course, like a lot of us, we came kicking and screaming. I was like, I'm here for 3 years. I negotiated a hard clad return contract. So I didn't lose money in my house. I'm like, 3 years and we're back. My husband's in commercial real estate. And he would say this has been just a godsend for us as well for his business, as well as I love what I did. So I ran the hydration team for Coke here to about 2007 when Coke said, it's time for you to come back to Atlanta. I said, no, thanks. So fast forward since then, I decided I went ahead and ran the teams for Novartis OTC for 5 years, their Walmart and Sam's Club business. And then I moved over into Hallmark Cards, which was a lot of fun, sweet, private, owned company. And then kind of missed the food and beverage side of it because that's really always where I've been with the exception of OTC. So I was an executive VP of sales for an up and coming coffee company that does private label and mostly branded. And so a friend of mine recruited me over and you have to come over and do that, did that. And after 3 years of traveling on and on every week, I decided, it's time that I do what I love, which was not necessarily managing the politics internally and sitting on an executive board. It was really more about what I love to do, and that was working with the customer. I love working with Walmart merchants. They're by far and I've worked in my other roles with Coca-Cola and Novartis, I worked with all the national retailers, Costco, HEB, everybody. And I will say it is such a treat work for Walmart. And it's amazing how I run across so many clients today that don't understand that. They think, oh my God, Walmart, I've heard such things, they're so bad, they're so hard to work for. Just not true. I mean, they're really smart and savvy merchants, and they're very fair, and they want to help you win because they know if you're winning, they're going to win. So that's what's been great. So it started Tiger Retail. I can't believe it's been 4 years, and I really did it as a passion. It was just about I love working and helping minority-owned businesses because those are the people that really, they can't afford to have a big team here like a Coca-Cola or General Mills, right? But we all know if you're here in Arkansas, it's real important to have some feet on the ground here, right? And really to have somebody that knows the system. And I laughed one day because I was representing one of my clients and we were working with the private label team. And I had a young person with the private label team at Walmart say, well, you know, we'd rather go direct and not go, you were telling my client, we'd rather go direct and not work with you as a broker. And my client said, well, why? You know, she's like the best broker we've ever worked with. And they said, oh, because that adds cost to the system. And it was interesting because she said, well, can you write something up for me? And so, you know, of course, as clients do, they go, Sharon, would you write something up so I can send to her? And sure enough, you know, I basically just said, look, you have to understand it's more efficient for this company who's, you know, based in California. All they do is work through brokers because they don't have the time and resources to go hire and staff full-time people to go in and learn and talk about, you know, you have to learn the systems and you have to step in and then you've got to maintain that, right? So, you know, and once he got through all the details explaining, not only do you have to know Walmart's proprietary systems, but Walmart and everybody who works with Walmart knows it's your job to manage your business in Walmart. It's not the buyer's job. It's going to be your job. So it's a weekly thing, right? It's weekly managing replenishment, it's doing sales analytics, and most importantly, how are you going to grow your business? Because that's what's important. What have you done for me lately? So it's great to get in there, but now the hard part comes, how you grow your business. So it's once people understand that, then they have a whole new appreciation for what you do. And then sometimes with Walmart people, they go, gee, scratch their head, you know, I didn't realize but you're right. There's a lot we expect of our suppliers to be successful.
Well, so I'm going to back up a few things you said that were really interesting that I want to dig just a tiny bit deeper, not dwell terribly long, but you said something to the effect of coming to Northwest Arkansas, kicking in and screaming. And that was very much, and what year would you have come here with Coca-Cola?
97. No, 2003.
2003. Okay. Well, so there were a lot of suppliers here at the time, but back that up, you know, by 5, even, you know, especially 10 years, there just weren't that many teams here. And there wasn't really much in Northwest Arkansas except, you know, Walmart and Tyson and JB Hunt and, you know, and so it was really difficult to get the best talent to come to Northwest Arkansas. Now, the funny thing is not long after that, you couldn't get people to leave. And so it did create, it created you know, a lot of folks that would go from team to team to team in order to avoid, in a lot of cases, going back to a headquarter, you know, position. The other thing I would say is, you know, I've never understood, and you kind of mentioned that, and maybe we don't have to go too deep on it, but the mindset that working with third parties, you know, reps and brokers created incremental costs and inefficiencies. You think about how steep the learning curve is. And it never made sense to me that it made more sense for a brand new supplier to spend 2 or 3 years figuring things out as they go, making mistakes, breaking promises, you know, that they never intended to break. How much better off not only would that supplier team be, but how much better off is the retailer in order to have the reliability, supply chain reliability alone, that goes along with having a more seasoned person associated with those early years. I've never understood it.
You know, it's interesting you say that. And you know, when talking with people about that, I think the best way to describe is that I can say to those companies, if you think about when you look at a Coca-Cola or P&G, you know, PepsiCo, all the companies out here, you think about who they send to come work on these teams. They don't send the new young people right off the bat, right?
Best of the best.
They're senior people, and they basically have to say, they sold to me, you know, if you want to continue to advance your career, you have to stop through Bentonville on your way there. And so that to me says a lot, because those companies now have lived it and they know it. So they know that you're going to have to bring your biggest and your best, because it is, you know, Walmart is a great company to work for, but they're big. It's an aggressive business. It's a big business, and it takes a lot of work, right? It takes a lot of work, and it takes a lot of experience to understand how you're not only going to get into the door, but I always say that's the easy part. It's growing sustainable profitability. And, that is what I think a lot of people forget today. It's really funny to sit and I used to have an office when I was with the coffee company, right at 8W, right on the corner, right across from headquarters, right, the new building.
Yeah.
Had a big patio out there on the 5th floor. And my staff and I used to laugh because we'd see this group of 3 people coming out, and then right when they get out the front door in the parking lot, we'd see them high-fiving.
Yes. Yes.
And we'd all start giggling and say, "Oh, you
They
don't
have
know."
no idea.
It's like, enjoy this moment, go
Right.
get a drink, raise a glass, because let me tell you what, it's going to be really hard after this, right? They had
We used to refer to that as the 14 seconds of celebration before that holy cow moment hits them. Like, what have we just agreed to do?
right.
You mentioned earlier, and this is obviously not a rah-rah session for Walmart, but Walmart did have a really tough reputation for years about just being a difficult company to work with. But the thing about Walmart, even though that they are advocating for their shopper, wanting to get the very best in price, and obviously, reliability of the supply chain, they want to make sure that their suppliers are able to operate and flow goods and keep their stores in stock. But Walmart is a company that has a culture that's of tremendous integrity, and they do what they say that they're going to do, and they've always been really, really reliable in that regard. So I want to shift gears a little bit, and I want you to talk about Tiger Retail. I want you to talk about what was your vision for the company when you got started. Talk about what it is you're doing today, and then do you have a sweet spot with respect to the types of companies that you're working with, either size, stage, category? Tell us about your business.
Okay. So given my foodie background, if you will, and I always say because I also love to eat and drink, but obviously most of my career has been in food and beverage. So clearly I have most of my clients are food and beverage. And then I also have some OTC clients, not a lot, but a handful of those, because really most of my time is food and beverage. But because I did spend some time in the OTC side, for 5 years, and I had a couple of people come to me and say, I really need your help on that. But for the most part, I'm going to be pretty selective. In the brokerage world, I like to say there's three types of brokers. You're going to have the really big ones like Acosta and Crossmark. And quite frankly, if you're a real small company, that's not going to be for you. Because unless you're a Tic Tac or something like that, you're just not going to get the love and attention that you really need. So, I mean, again, they do a really good job at what they do, but it's different need. So it's really got to find like what fits for you. So for me, number one, most importantly, Costa would never be what I'm doing because I'm not. That's the national customer. The other two are going to be people like myself, where there's the local companies that want to be really big. And maybe when they see how big they can get, and then maybe go sell themselves or just see how big they can get. Then there's others like myself that say, I'm more in a senior part of my career where my objective is not to see how many customers I can get and grow so big and then sell and have a big army of people. That's not where I am at this point, because again, the more you grow, the further away I would get from the selling side. And like I said, I'm going back to my passion. When I think about my days peddling cold wine on the streets of New Orleans, it was about face-to-face with the client, understanding the retailer. And again, it goes back to, I think about my days with Coke and the great training about how do you create profitable, sustainable profitability. And it goes back to something you touched on. Yeah, Walmart can be hard because they're all about getting the best price, but really focus on what the consumer wants. But the reason why is if you put a product, if the buyer puts a product in that's not best for their shopper, at the end of the day, it's not going to be profitable for you. You're end up going to buy back product or lose product or waste product, right? I mean, and you waste a lot of time and resources. So again, you can make sale today, but if it's not profitable long-term, no one wins. And so that goes to the heart of always understanding the consumer is at the core. And that's why I love, again, working with Walmart merchants. They get that. They understand it's not about just cramming an item down my shopper because I like that person or I had a relationship. He used to work at Walmart. So, I'll bring on his item. You don't get that, because in the day, that's not what's going to be successful and profitable for both Walmart and yourself. So that being said, I work with the food and beverage clients that I feel, number one, have the integrity first and foremost. Number two, they understand and want to learn, because you have some people that come in and they don't want to listen. They don't want to develop a strategy. They don't want to hear what you have to say. That's not going to work for me at this point, because I also have a reputation to uphold again with my buyers. So a little bit has to do with them filtering of me. Am I the right size for them? And then also, quite frankly, do I feel that you're a fit for Sharon Belto and Tiger Retail? Because once again, I call myself like a boutique broker, if you will, because I'm never going to turn over the sales to one of my employees. I will always be the face of the customer with them and their leadership team. And then what I call the heavy lifting, which is the back end. It's the replenishment, it's the sales analytics, it's helping with invoice disputes, helping property, all that nitty gritty that's so important to our suppliers, right? Because that's how they get paid. But it's not glamorous, but it's the real hard part. I fortunately have a small team that does that, and they are wonderful. Thank goodness, because that's what makes you successful. Because there is a difference between when you talk about a small guys, there is a full service broker, and that's what I just defined. And then you're going to have people that say I'm a broker, but they're really, and there's a need for these, but they're really someone that's just going to maybe get you in the door and be the sales. But they go, I don't get involved in all the background detail stuff. So that's probably appropriate if somebody has a big service team, customer service team, that they can, work with an 8 in Walton, for example, that will do a lot of the replenishment and those services for them.
Yep. 8th and Walton company I started, just had to put it in there because it's like the company. So the business is like a child to me, and I'm so proud to see
I didn't say that for your benefit. I mean it.
how she's grown up. It's been fun to watch. Let's talk a little bit about lay of the land, and I'm gonna present a perspective, not necessarily my perspective, but I'm gonna present a perspective, and then I want you to correct it, modify it. That there is a perspective that pre-COVID, that inside the box, brick and mortar retail, it was all about big brands and private label, and a lot of the smaller brands, not necessarily squeezed out, but even though Walmart had, open call, the real bias was toward the big brands. And as those big companies continued to consolidate and strengthen and sharpen pricing, it became harder and harder and harder for a smaller, sort of startup supplier to edge them out. So that's a brick and mortar perspective. And now that there's been in a post-COVID, and we're still kind of in the middle of it, with supply chain pressures, there's been near-term opportunities for these smaller brands to kind of inch their way back in. So talk about that. And then on the online side, it seems like there was this sort of free for all for a while, as Walmart and every other marketplace was trying to get as many products listed for the sake of broad assortment as possible. And even though their algorithms get better and better and better to deal with just this enormous assortment, helping shoppers find what it is that they're really looking for, it seems like there might even be a little bit of rationalization of that online assortment. So modify the perspective that I just offered, and give us kind of your sense for the lay of the land today, especially as it relates to a smaller company trying to break in.
Sure. Great question. Great question. So I'm going to go back. I must talk pre-COVID, and I'll talk post-COVID or during COVID. But what you're bringing up is a great point that really went on, I would say, going back almost at least 10 years. And so let me give you a example. So house of brands, a lot of us heard that term, right? Walmart is a house of brands, Sam's Club, house of brands. Absolutely. Are they yet? Yes, because people still want the Lay's Frito chips, and people still want Bounty. They want Powerade, they want Coke. However, that being said, they started coming out very aggressively with private label. So there's certainly a lot of people that want private label, but you can't grow your business necessarily on private label. You've got to have that good, better, best strategy. So private labels covered, that's going to be on the good end of the spectrum, right? And then the brands are usually going to fall somewhere probably in that better and best. And what happened is when they really folks started 10 years ago, when Walmart was just about, we're going so big with the big guys. Here's a true story. So I was with Coca-Cola. I was running the hydration team, which Powerade fell into that. At the time, I'm sorry to say, my Powerade brand had a 7% share market.
Yeah.
And we were DSD, Gatorade's in the warehouse. And the buyer at the time, because they didn't have the guardrails that Walmart has in today, could just push out product. And because she knew the more pallets she shipped in, they couldn't keep it in the back room. So they put it on the floor. So when my Coke DSD drivers would pull up and try to get a display, they'd say, I've got Gatorade coming out of my ears, right? Well, that was great and worked for a while because it's a big brand. But then here's what's happening. When you look at when a buyer starts saying, I need a category advisor, what happens when a brand gets so big like a Gatorade? They have a 93% share. Guess who has the leverage and the power to negotiate?
That's right.
So Walmart, a lot of these retailers start getting really smart and saying, I can't give them all the leverage. Plus, the other thing is, if I've got my whole shelf of Gatorade, and that's what I've trained my consumers, that's what they're going to buy. And then guess what? They have a recall. You're putting all your eggs in one basket. So now we saw the pendulum start swinging. In the same time that was happening, there became a need to say, let's help minority-owned businesses. Let's promote made in the USA, i.e. open call, right? And so, gotta turn my heater off. And so they did that. And when they started doing that, it opened the door. And what they found was a lot of these smaller retailers who had some really cool products and they were trending. Because guess what? Millennials said, I don't want a Lay's potato chip. I want some organic, cool flavor, something really different. They were even Nike, it's not as cool as it used to be because everybody had Nike. So as the consumer is evolving, Walmart started evolving and realized that, hey, you know what? We can add some diversity to our lineup because people are flavor fatigued. People want to try new things. We can really drive sales through using trial. And that's going to come from the small person. And hey, you know what? That smaller company is African-American or woman-owned or, made in the USA. And so there's a lot of good things I can do by giving back. And it's going to benefit, quite frankly, Walmart, right? Because you're creating a balance. And so as they started doing that, they started realizing that consumers do want a variety. And that was a complaint they would get because, they would go to a Publix or go to a Whole Foods, right? And they get all these cool things to try. And at Walmart, you were stuck with your 2 flavors of basically all Frito-Lay and a few little of something different and private label. And that's not what consumers want. So again, the consumer is going to drive what's going to be successful. I think Walmart was smart enough to realize this is what the consumer is wanting. And it can benefit us too, and also benefit companies that we believe is socially responsible to support. And that's women and minority. And hey, Made in the USA is a great thing. So it's been a great thing for everybody. And what I find more than anything, and I love this, and I would say this to every Walmart buyer that if they were sitting in front of me, I would say they know darn well when I worked for the Coke and the Gallows of the world or the Novartis, they would beat you up because you're so big. And they wouldn't forgive you. You had out of stock, you'd be in that, they'd say you're going to have a 6 a.m. Replenishment call every Wednesday morning with your team. This kind of punishment, right? Because you're out of stock. When I look at how they work with my smaller suppliers, they are so understanding. Because now let's move into COVID. When COVID hit, a lot of my small guys, when it comes to getting the glass jars or coming in the lids, getting the labels, guess what? They're last on the pecking order. Because if you're a packaging quarry company or glass company and P&G is out there saying, right, they're going to cut everybody else. And that's real world. And that's what happened. I tell you what, Walmart has been wonderful about being understanding because they realized it was a real world situation. They've been understanding about cost going up, and they have been partnering with my clients and myself to say, hey, what can we do to help you? They've been flexible, instead of having the 16 ounce, if you've got 20 ounce jars that you have available versus 16, we'll figure out a way to get that on the shelf. So they've been just wonderful to work with. And they really, one thing I love too, is they really have a passion. They appreciate the passion that these small entrepreneurs have.
Yeah.
And I think they really value, and not that they don't value the Coca-Colas and the Sharon Beltos that were, pitching, the big brands, the Evians and the Powerade. I mean, they did, because they also know that that's moving a lot of volume, but they also know that they've understood that having a balance on their shelf, it can't just be about private label and the big house of brands anymore. You've got to have that, you've got to be able to round it out. So it's been a great thing to work with. And that's why I said it's great to see how Walmart appreciates that versus other retailers that I've worked with through other partnerships. You'll hear them say, and this is another pretty big one, they'll go, oh, don't even pitch a product to me unless I see it in IRI as one of the top 10. Well, that's crazy,
Yeah.
So you really see Walmart takes a very opposite approach to that.
You're right. And it would be really easy for an outsider to look at, start off as get on the shelf and now is open call and be cynical about it and say, well, this is just lip service, but Walmart is putting so many resources against it. Not only, head count, but to allocate that much space when the stakes are so high, where every square inch inside a store matters. They're taking some real risks on new products. And forgive me for the folks that are attending live. Forgive me for not doing this sooner. If you've got questions for Sharon, go ahead and hit me on the chat and send those to me. And I want to get your questions submit to her while we've got her. We'll be wrapping up in just a few minutes. So Sharon, I'm going to offer another perspective, and again, not necessarily my own perspective, but a lot of people used to look at the way for a young company, a small consumer product company that's looking to go from a direct-to-consumer seller, maybe a local or regional seller, to working with major retailers like Walmart, that the first step you should take would be to get online, because there's fewer barriers to entry. It's a lot easier to get started. And once you've got a presence, you can start generating POS data. And then you've got something that you can actually show a buyer. And so online was very much an on-ramp for potentially doing more business inside the box. Is that your feeling about the way things are today as well?
Absolutely. I saw it coming about 3 years ago. It's now become a rite of passage. So I would say in the last 2 years, every single line review I go into now, even the templates are changed. You have to spend as much time talking about not both, but you have to have an omni-channel approach. And I tell broker friends of mine, a lot of salespeople and companies go, oh, it's so confusing. I hate e-commerce. You spend so much time, there's no volume, money to be made there. And I go, you know what, but strategically, you have to be there and you've got to invest in that time. So it's the same thing I tell my clients. And you hit it on the nail on the head. It is important that, and it's not easy. Okay, because a lot of you get clients go, we don't ship direct. Okay, fine. So guess what now? There's companies like Deliver RR that will do it for you, right? There's 3PLs now, Hub Group, RJW, those companies will also help manage for you. Walmart now has Walmart replenishment systems on Walmart.com. So those are things that as a broker, I help them go figure out. And it's a little scary to people, but I tell them, look, you're not going to win without taking some risk. But first and foremost, when the buyer says, look, I don't have another line review for 6 months, I'll say, perfect. In the meantime, we're going to spend that time getting set up online. Yeah. So go into it. Don't have to be too broad. You got to be broad enough to be relevant on .com. Put your top 5 sellers on there. Add your cost in. You don't have to be cheap, you're dirt cheap, because you're going to have to cover your costs. So make it profitable for you, but get online. Now, then a lot of people say, but I'm online. What if I'm not successful? They're not going to look at it from store. That's not true at all, because Walmart merchants know, listen, they're not Amazon today. They're still doing a very small part of what Amazon does in most categories that I deal with in the food and beverage. So know that what buyers are recognizing that, number one, my supplier is being supportive of their request. But more importantly, they're being strategic and they're building an omni-channel approach to their business. Because at the end of the day, we do know, and you'll hear Walmart say this all the time, people shop where they want to shop and when they want to shop. We can't force them to shop in a brick and mortar online or when to shop in brick and mortar or online. They're going to do both. They're also going to, a lot of times we know that like 70% of the time, people will research it online first and then they'll go buy it in the store. So that online presence is important. So as much of it as a pain it may still be right now, Number one, it's getting a lot easier. Walmart's done a really good job. They're still not where we want them to be, but they're really bringing their e-commerce platform a long way, and they're doing a lot of good things there. The applications that people like myself and those sales teams have to work with now have come a long way. It used to be a nightmare to set an item up. That's getting better. So what I would say is you're absolutely right. That's going to be really critical. But I tell people all the time, you've got to figure it out. And if you're not willing to do that, then you probably are not going to play at Walmart, because what you're telling the merchant is, I'm not that nimble. And you hear Walmart retailers all say all the time, the suppliers they love working with are those that are nimble, those that are willing to hear their feedback, take their feedback, and really say, hey, yeah, let me go try that, right? Because merchants are really good. They're such experts at their category, right? Because their categories they don't deal with the core of the store. They've got a pretty small scope, so to speak, because the volume is so big. So they become such experts. I'll never forget one time I had a honey client come in, and used to meeting with buyers at like a Target and a Kroger's and some other smaller retailers, and they knew nothing really about honey like he did. He was the honey expert. And all of a sudden he walked out of line, and he goes, oh my God, I can't believe how knowledgeable she was on honey. I'm like, yeah, because that's what she's doing all day long. And she's listening to people from all over the world, all size companies, who are truly the experts. And so if I told my clients one time, I told them 100, if you go into a line review, if you go into a meeting with a buyer and really listen with open ears, you can learn so much. And be successful. And if you're willing to take the feedback and really be nimble with it. So your point is very good. COVID, whether it's going to be an epidemic or a pandemic, as they say, online is going to continue to grow now that we're hopefully we're getting toward post-COVID, right? But we saw it shoot through the roof. It's going to continue to become really important, and it's such a strategic play. So very, very great point you bring up, Matt.
Yeah. Back to what you were saying about the investment that suppliers are making in the online business, I would bet that there are teams that are making nothing online because they've outsourced 100% of the management and fulfillment of that business. But it's such an important part of developing not only the relationship with and connectivity with that retailer, but generating sales and taking market share and driving awareness and driving trial and all the things that go into building a business long term. I think a lot of folks are maybe a little bit short-sighted when they look at the small margins from e-commerce, but and even direct to consumer. A lot of companies don't want to do it because of the costs and so forth. But you think about the lifetime value of a relationship with an individual customer, not to mention the lifetime value of a relationship with a major retailer like Walmart. I think that investment is critical. So I've kept you longer than I intended to. Yeah, please.
Something you said, Matt. You touched on something I think it's important for people to know is that you've got to value learnings and data, right? That is so invaluable, and you can't always put a price tag on it, but it's so important when you get consumer insights. And one thing that people have to understand, and this is now coming up more and more in line reviews, you get online, think about the rich data you get, because where your consumers are coming from and where your sales are coming from. And so all of a sudden we take that data, and one of the main questions that comes out of a line review when you bring in a small client that says, no, we're not going to put you in 4,000 stores, but let's put you in 700-800 stores. And the first question they're going to ask that supplier is, where do your online sales come from? And let's focus in on those DCs in parts of the country. So now that's a valuable insight that you weren't inside. You would stand there going, I don't know, and thinking much how you could be a failure, because if your sales over index on the Northeast and the West Coast, and they roll you out in Texas because it happens to be larger formats, you fail. And it was because you weren't in the right spot. So I always remind people, don't underestimate the value of the insights and the consumer data you get from going online.
So just in wrapping up, it sounds like that you are bullish on smaller brands, because retailers recognize that, particularly the younger consumers that have all the money, by the way, that they have a desire to try something new. They don't want their parents' potato chips. They want to try something different. It seems like you're bullish on these younger companies. What would be for a company to think about, like, again, Michelle, best toffee I've ever had out of Michigan. I'd love to see her and her company selling to Walmart. What would be kind of the bar, the minimum that a company would need to be ready to do today in order to be having that conversation with, let's say, Walmart.com?
Well, and let me add something to one thing you said. Don't get me wrong. I work with a lot of small companies because I see where they want to be able to grow. And I love it because the runway for them is so broad, right? But my ultimate goal, if it aligns with the supplier, would be to take them from this at Walmart to being national and being so big where maybe if their goal is to get sold one day, they turn around and get sold. And I've had a couple of those clients. So it's a great feeling when you go from being real small to one of the big guys. So if that aligns again with what the supplier wants, right? So, but that's not all what they want to be. So to answer your question about the kind of the small, if you will, there's not really a minimum amount, I would say, from a dollar perspective. I would say it's more importantly in that if you think about the 4 Ps, right? It's not rocket science. It's about they've got a good strategy or a basic strategy that they're internally aligned to, which is around your pricing, your packaging is right, where it's placed in the store, what department, where on shelf, and then also the promotion of it. So because there's some companies that may have a great idea, but they're nowhere close. It's not to say I won't work with those. I work with those on a different type of a relationship than I do for, let's say, a customer that already comes and says, hey, I already feel like I've got a pretty strong strategy, but I really need help getting going online and store.
So Michelle just sent me not a question, but a point that I think is really good. And I'm not suggesting that she is apprehensive, but I think there's a lot of apprehension among these smaller companies because they worry that once they get started, it'll be like drinking out of a fire hose, and how in the world you go from selling out of a local store, doing a little bit of direct to consumer online, and now you're on Walmart.com. What happens if you can't keep up with it? The ability to work in brick and mortar on a local and regional basis allows you a lot of control and saying, well, we're only in this many doors and on this many stores. But how do you throttle that in, online? How do you make sure that you can keep up with it?
Yeah. So, online is a lot more flexible than the store. So I would say absolutely don't be afraid to kind of put your toe in the water and maybe jump in a little bit in the wading pool side and do that with online. Because I think that's a little bit, I would disagree a little bit or say it's a misconception, because if, the buyer's going to work with you and say, okay, I want to try you online. And let's say you're a product that really over indexes with the Southeast. Okay, so let me give you a couple DCs, 200-300 stores. Well, you get in those stores, it takes off. You're set on that mod for a minimum of 6 months, usually a year, because they're not resetting as often. And that becomes a lot bigger challenge, because if the buyer does open the door and give you a test and you can't fulfill it, and again, it's a little weird time with COVID because everybody understands the supply issues. But let's say we're not in the forgiving time of transportation supply issues with COVID. You don't fill it, you're done. You're one and done. Online is a lot more forgiving because number one, you control that listing. So you can go in and move products around. You can right in real time. So we can, with our clients, we can change pricing. We can change the product assortment. So if you run out of stock on that, you're going to substitute something else. So again, that's probably another big advantage that you brought up, Matt, of why you really should get out there online. It's not going to be a lot of volume on Walmart.com. It's not. But you also have much more control if you're online. And here's another beautiful thing about it. You can do virtual bundles online without incurring packaging costs, right? So you can sell, if you sell, let's say, jars of floral honey, you can do a program where you say 3 for $15, pick any 3. Whereas if you go in store, you'd have to work with a co-pack, you got to fill out bundling and everything else. So there's a lot more you can do. You can promote your product. Again, you've got a lot more flexibility.
Yeah. Sharon, this has been so much fun. You and I share a passion for these small, upstart, early stage, fast growing consumer brands that are on almost no one's radar because they're operating, they're so focused on making such a great product, and they've got these passionate, consumers that are buying up everything that they can make. So it's fun to spend this time with you. And if someone wanted to reach out to you and your team to initiate a conversation and find out if there is a fit and an opportunity to work together, what's the best way to reach you?
Yeah, thank you. So got my website, which is tiger-retail.com. You can contact me through that. It's also got my direct line on there. So please call me, or I'm based in downtown Bentonville, about right across from the Bentonville Public Library. I've got a big sign out there, Tiger Retail, that looks like that. Stop by. I'd love to see you anytime. My door's open Monday through Friday, so stop by. But easiest would probably be my website. So, and Michelle, if you're still out there listening, I love toffee, so I'd love for you to stop by and drop me out some samples.
Oh, it's so good. Sharon, I'll get it to you. I've got some. It's so good. Well, thank you so much. It's been so much fun getting to know you and your business better, and wish you continued success. Thank you so much. Have a great day.